Hey everybody, Phil here from Redefine. So I know a lot of times I talk about leadership as this abstract thing, the practice or theories, concepts, ideas, the definition. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to show you how you can take that leadership definition and apply it directly to a specific task. And I'm going to use that to show you why that leadership definition is so important. And the example we're going to use, the task we're going to use is scheduling. Scheduling is pretty simple. It's this idea that we need to get the right people with the right set of skills into the right place at the right time. And if we do that well, then we can accomplish whatever our task, whatever our objective, our work is for the day. However, scheduling is one of those things where we have a very close intersection between people's work lives and their other lives, their families, their personal commitments, their hobbies, maybe their other careers, their health often. And because of that, scheduling is a very critical aspect of how we pay attention to our relationship with our employees, our staff, our coworkers, and anyone else involved in the work that we do. We are asking people to take time from those other things and give it to the organization. And when we do that, what is really a pretty simple task, getting people into do work, becomes much more complicated, and it can have a very significant impact on our relationships. That's second core. And that's why scheduling is so important. As leaders, we need to make sure that we are not only trying to schedule people to get the work done, but that we are paying attention to how we do that scheduling and how that impacts those people we're asking to come in. So let me give you my own example. I used to be responsible for getting 3 to 5 of my staff out into the field, 600 locations spread out across the United States. And we needed to get that staff out to do leadership briefings, to train employees, to do a whole bunch of stuff at each of those locations. So we would send them out for a week or two at a time. They would travel between locations every day. They'd be on airplanes, in cars, whatever it was that they needed to be at the right place at the right time. And these obviously were pretty important trips. Folks were wanting us to be there. They invited us to come, and we were expected to accomplish certain things to make sure that the money we were spending was being used wisely. The challenge is, of course, that those locations, those 600 locations, all had operational realities. They had other things that were going to come up, and we couldn't always predict what those would be. So we would send a team out, and the folks they were supposed to meet with on Tuesday morning weren't available. Now they're available Thursday afternoon, and our team on Thursday afternoon is already 200 miles down the road. Obviously, this created a lot of tension. Folks were frustrated. They were disappointed. We were not able to meet all of our commitments. And I, as a leader, was getting frustrated because we were missing opportunities because we couldn't accommodate the operational reality. And that was showing to those folks in the field that we didn't value the reality of their work, that we did not value and respect their operational challenges. So I had to step back as a leader and say, how can I adjust how we plan these trips to be more supportive of the relationship that we have with those local staff? I had to step back and say, what is it about the reality that these individuals in these 600 locations are facing that I'm not recognizing and that I'm allowing to impact my ability to accomplish that vision? And what I realized is that, like all people, they had other commitments. They had other responsibilities, in this case to their work that they were doing every single day. And something came up, and of course they're going to want to deal with it. And that might mean that we are slightly lower priority. So I had to step back and recognize that fact, and then start to make changes in the way that we did scheduling to make sure that we weren't creating frustration and we were able to accomplish what we set out to do. So I did a lot of different things, some big, some small. I'm going to give you some examples, but the truth is these examples only matter to me because they are specific to my operational situation, my specific leadership challenge. First off, I made sure that we had enough people on the trips, generally by adding an additional person, even if it wasn't necessarily in the same functional area. So that if we had to drop somebody off and let them stay for an extra day or send them ahead to get somebody briefed earlier, we could do that. In addition, we also tried to push a lot more information and responsibility to local staff so that they could conduct at least the basics of what we were trying to do, which obviously increased our effectiveness as well. I also did several small things that seemed pretty minor, but maybe had the biggest impact. First off, when we were creating itineraries, I would make sure that we had enough time, that we started early enough to build out an itinerary so that we had the whole thing lined out before we sent out confirmations. And that's a pretty minor change, but sometimes we really want to confirm right away. We want to say, hey, I've heard back from the first 2 people, we're going to go with that. And then we hear back from the next couple people, and all of a sudden now we have to go to those first two and change our plans. And that's incredibly frustrating for everybody involved. So I would wait until all of the plans were confirmed and send out a final confirmation at the end. The reality is that plans do change, that people get sick, that people have other obligations come up, that things happen outside of our control. And we have to recognize that when it happens. So just being vocal about that, just saying thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for coming in on your day off, even though I know you had to give up some family time. Recognizing people when they do make sacrifices is a huge aspect of showing people that we value and respect them. And we as leaders have to make sure that we are being conscious of that we are deliberately showing that commitment, that recognition, that value when things do happen. So those are some examples, big and small, of how I stepped back as a leader and adjusted our processes in scheduling travel. You are going to have to find, whatever your scheduling challenge is, you are going to have to find specific ways to be more effective and make sure that you are building the relationships you want that match your specific situation. So as always, there's an assessment here for you to look at what's going on in your leadership environment. So the important thing here is the exercise, as always. What I want you to do here is pretty simple. Scheduling is probably one of our biggest challenges because it is so directly linked between people's work and personal lives, but you probably have other similar tasks or functions you perform as a leader. So I want you to go find one of those tasks that runs on autopilot, something that is pretty straightforward, that seems relatively simple, that you just kind of do. It may be inventory management, it may be building technical training, it may be doing something like that that seems almost self-managed, like you don't have to pay attention to it. And I want you to examine how the way you are handling that function affects the relationships of the people involved. I want you to look at that process and decide, is this the best way to do this, or are we affecting our relationships in a negative way? To do that, I want you to do a few things. First, I want you to write down the steps that you take to handle that process. Whatever actions it is that you take, who's responsible, write those down on a sheet of paper. And then I want you to look at those actions and write down a little bit about what that action, the impact that it has on the people involved. What does that process, that task, that action show whoever's involved you think or feel about your relationship with them? Does it demonstrate that you value them? Or are we saying, no, we don't care so much about how you feel, or we don't care so much about what you do outside of work. We just want you to do this and get it done and move on. Once you've done that, go back and ask yourself, is there a better outcome? Is there some way that this specific function can help demonstrate that we do value and respect the people involved? Once you do that, I want you to go back to that first list you made of all the steps that you take and identify specific ones that you should change or maybe add. And this might be as simple as just recognizing somebody at some point in the process, just saying thank you. And then, of course, as always, create a plan, put it into your calendar, put in a reminder to specifically take the steps that you've identified, to make the changes you've identified, and then in a week, a month, whatever the time frame might be, revisit the situation with the folks involved and make sure that those changes are having the outcome you want, that the relationships are being affected in the way that you intended and not in some other unexpected manner. Again, this is how we begin to take that definition, that idea of leadership, and use it to put our focus where it needs to be. In this case, shifting our focus away from the specific things that we're trying to accomplish, the functions, the tasks of managing an organization, and putting them on those relationships to make sure that the functions and the tasks we're performing are reinforcing the relationships that we want and need to turn that vision into reality. Like I said, if we're out there creating schedules without recognizing that people do have other commitments in lives, we are going to be hurting our relationships with those individuals. And the result of that is that we are less able to accomplish turning our vision into reality. That's when you go back to process of learning and start to make changes in how we act and how we manage things so that we are creating the relationships that we want and need. Thanks as always for watching. And if you've enjoyed this, if it has offered you any help, please consider subscribing to our email. Our weekly email is short, it's interesting, entertaining even, and it offers you a way to continue to focus on your leadership practice